This episode is brought to you by Kiko Socks. With a pair of Kikos, you'll have an experience that keeps you focused on your performance and not your feet. Use our coupon code POD15 for 15% off your order at kikosocks.com.
Welcome to Season 2 of Pod Practice, where Mama Bird alumni Quinn Feiner, Mikey Lund, and myself, Alex Atkins, talk about Ultimate from the perspective of players and coaches. We want to engage with you, so please reach out. Say hi, ask a question, give some feedback. We look forward to talking with you. To reach out, follow us on Instagram or YouTube at podpractice_pod. Listen on Spotify at podpractice or email us at show@podpracticepod.com. I hope you enjoy this episode.
In this episode, we're launching our new Chalk Talk series where we plan to bring on coaches to learn about their philosophies and teaching methods. Okay,
All right.
a long overdue guest. Today we welcome in one of the most innovative minds in the game, Coach TK, Tim Kefalas. TK and I first crossed paths more than 15 years ago now, I think. But really started to get to know each other when we started coaching Summit together in December 2021. I think that timeline's right. TK is one of the most dedicated people I've ever been around, and has changed the way the three of us think about defense. TK, welcome to the show. I want to ask you how you're doing, but I also want to give you a little bit of time to maybe address Alex Atkins, our favorite trash talker, and some of his comments directed towards you.
I'm doing well. I got a yowling cat in the background, so if y'all are picking that up, my bad.
I love it.
But no, I'm an avid listener. I enjoy listening to y'all chat. My favorite Kins moment of the pod was when, I don't remember which one it was, the last one, the Kins against the world.
Yeah.
And he said, for people like TK, like it might feel like we may never be back or something. It got me right in the funnies. So no, I don't think we need to address it. Just like we'll bring it to the space, let it marinate a little bit, and strategically.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think if it wasn't true, maybe we'd have to address it more. But I think since everyone understands, there's not much to address. I did like the intro a lot because I love when you compliment TK and it makes him super uncomfy because TK doesn't like good positive things being thrown out there about him.
Why don't we start with your story through Ultimate and how you ended up with Bravo?
Yeah, I went to Colorado State, CSU, for undergrad. I'm from Fort Collins, where CSU is. Grew up there, same as Quinn. In 2003, CSU used to have this awesome disc golf course on campus, like on the proper campus, like you threw over people walking to class and over the lagoon that's there. And a buddy of mine were playing around, and we saw a flyer for the club disc golf, for the club Ultimate team tryouts, and thought, hey, Frisbees are cool. Let's give it a whirl. So went to the tryouts, found my people, found my community, played 5 years at CSU, coached 10 years there, and honestly never looked back. Been super involved with club, college, youth on some levels, AUDL the last couple of seasons. How I arrived at Bravo, 2019, Cody Spicer and I had worked with a couple other folks to found a new mixed team in Colorado. It's called Mixed Signals, and our goals were to really make a super inclusive team whose core principles were about inclusivity, ownership, some other elements. So we played out that season. It was super fun. We had a great group of people together from all over Colorado. We had a pretty wide radius of players, pretty diverse group, a lot of folks that were pretty new to playing club, and that was a super great experience. But just founding a new team and the politics that went into recruiting players and some tension and whatnot with pre-existing teams and whatnot, it was super I'm always stressed, y'all know that, but it was super stressful for me. So I was after that season, even though I really enjoyed that team, I think I was about ready to be done or take a break.
From
And
Ultimate in general?
yeah, from coaching. And then Todd Wolma, who was a captain at the time, emailed me to ask if I was interested in applying for a position coaching Bravo. He had talked to Jack Hinchliff a bit about who had been coached by me at CSU and was a Bravo player at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, this is flattering. I just coached a team to ninth at mixed regionals. They must be super impressed with that." And when I interviewed with, I remember pretty interesting interview process. Nutt was a captain at the time. Todd interviewed with Joe Durst, who had been brought on as well, and
Was there
Elliot
one other
Erickson.
captain at the
I think
time?
Elliot was a
Elliot.
captain at that time. Yeah, and then came on board, and that was just before the 2020 season, so we didn't end up playing. But this would be my third, just wrapping up my third season coaching, like having actually played a season, but my fourth being involved with the team. Yeah, it's been pretty awesome. A lot of cool people I knew peripherally or knew of, and the opportunity to work with them and get more connected for better or for worse to all you CU players. It's been fun. It's been a
Yeah.
really cool experience.
Hopefully we can kind of circle back to that in a second. But you mentioned Spicer starting that the mixed signals team with Spice.
Yeah.
This is a question I think all of us are curious about. Can you talk about your relationship with Cody and why you've bonded so tightly over the last decade or so?
Well, it's funny because I think about this a lot in like little happenstances that really change your life. But the first time I met Spicer, I co-founded Choice City Hops, which is an open team up in Fort Collins. It's like a low to mid tier men's team, open team. And the first time Spicer and I crossed paths, he had finished undergrad at South Dakota School of Mines, and
Mm-hmm.
he came to a hops practice randomly, and he's just some dude with sneakers on. He was hurt at the time, and I just didn't give him
Pants.
the time of day. I'm like, get out of here, shoe guy. You don't even have cleats. Um, and then he went to grad school at CSU, um, and we just really connected. Like his first semester, he came in with a really talented class, bunch of people that had a lot of really great youth experience. Jake Servati, Jack Hinsliff, who I talked about, Dave Miller from Lakewood, Dylan Johnson. There's a lot of really, really talented young people in that group. And Spicer being a little bit older, it was a little bit easier for me to connect with him. And he's just so thoughtful, like about his game and like driven to be better. Like one of the first things we did is like he had a little bit of awkward flick form, and I'll be the first to tell you I'm not the best person for teaching flick form, but him and I plugged on a GoPro and did a bunch of throwing sessions back and forth so he could see like how to work on fixing mechanics. And I mean, I just use that as a small example of like every element of his game is something he's thoughtful and humble about and always is working hard to improve. And that energy coupled with the fact that, as y'all know, like he only has one gear, it's like all in on the field all the time, and that really is pretty awesome. It's not a common trait, and couple that with he's brilliant. Like he's super intelligent about the game. His real time processing is almost peerless relative to like how he can break down what's going on in front of him and react in the moment. I mean, I think the best example, you guys have seen it, but that D he got, like the blindside layout D
On the
against
summit.
Minnesota,
Yeah.
where he just like was off his feet before the disc, like before he even had vision of the disc. Like that's just a testament to his processing. So the fact that like him and I can talk through like really nuanced specific pieces, and then he's able to just go out and do it, or like bring pieces to me from the field that are like, hey, this little tiny thing is happening, and this is the outcome and effect on it, and this is like how we could adjust, or why it's something that I can't contest, or X, Y, and Z. Like that's always been a really cool thing that him and I can do together. So, and we got a lot in common. We both like basketball. We both dislike CU. That's not true. But yeah.
Would you say that your relationship on the field is more strengthened by your relationship off, or vice versa, or does it just go hand in hand?
I mean, it's a chicken egg thing. Like we never would have become super good friends if I didn't coach him and play with him a little bit. So they do go hand in hand. I mean, we're super good friends. I was a groomsman in his wedding. he's a good dude and a really good player. So
Kins and Quinn, who do you think he matches up better on, Spicer, between the two of you?
Kins.
Definitely. I mean, Spicer likes to guard more backfield oriented, probably, I would assume. So,
What do you think, TK?
unquestionably, Quinn's too fast.
Oh, another.
I'm gonna
Kins
get you.
burn.
I'm gonna get you, Kins.
I mean, it doesn't upset me now because I feel
Because
like
it's just true. It's just true. Like,
well, it is true.
Exactly. There's nothing to be upset about.
And also, like, I'm fortunate to get guarded by him so frequently. Like, it's made me so much better. Like, you play Spicer a little bit at practice, and like, I just feel like after that, like, there's not many people you're matching. I mean, actually, there's no one I'm matching up against outside of
Spice
on another game that like would make me be more thoughtful and like work harder. Like the biggest thing for that Spicer has had on my game is the staying moving and never stopping, because for the first couple times when he guards you stop and you're just like sucked into the black hole that is Spicer's, and then that really forces you to keep moving, and that is a great benefit of having him guard you all the time.
This TK interview is turning into a little Spicer love fest here, but we can sort of credit him to making a lot of us better, I think. And just like Tape, who just finished, what was it, runner up in breakout club player of the year in the last 2 weeks or so of practice. Spicer was just hounding him and just like inches away. And Tape, I think, mentioned this right after nationals, that being guarded by Spice just made the margins seem so much bigger against other defenders.
Yeah,
it's great. And the other part of it too is like then having to guard him if there's a turnover.
Yeah,
is honestly more difficult for me after a while. Like after a while, you learn how he's playing defense, and it's easier to adjust. But there's nothing I can learn about like him just like running hard on the turn. Like I know it's gonna happen, and I still am upset about it every time. Or like I think just the funniest one is like a lot of ultimate players I don't think would really do this, but I just remember one of our last practices, maybe it was Summit or Bravo, but someone threw me a huck. It was a little overthrown. I like tried to lay out for it. It was pretty gassed. And like a lot of players, maybe they like walk it back, they wait for you to come back, and Spicer just picked up the disc, ran to the end zone line, and started running like give goes as I'm like trying to get back on defense. And I really do appreciate that.
I mean, it's a testament to people. It's not just a Spicer thing, but I'm sure most teams say it, right? Like you got to push yourself at practice. Practices should be your biggest competition.
right.
But for the people that can really do that and like play with that energy and that intensity, like tournament level intensity all the time at practice, makes everybody better. And I think one of the things, I'm sure we'll get into these pieces as we go through it. Like one of the things that like made me feel really good heading into nationals is just the whole team energy with that kind of like approach to practice for like the last 4 or 5 weeks was spot on. Like they were super intense, but never like to the point where it's tipping over and we're getting like overly angry, but just like that hot burn. I don't know even how to describe it. Practices were good vibes for that very reason, right? Folks are pushing each other, making each other better.
Yeah, that's a good segue, I think, into coaching philosophy. We've wanted to bring you on so long. We originally started this right after the 2022 club season, and when it wasn't the first year that you ran defense. I'm trying to not use team specific language unless you give the green light, TK.
If you give the name away, then everyone's gonna figure it out.
I mean, we run it basically every point. I don't think the name matters.
Your AP philosophy, all person defense. Bravo 2022 wasn't the first time you had ran it at any level or even in club, but can you just give us your overview of your coaching philosophy and your approach to defense specifically, and like what spurred some of these things in your in that big brain of yours?
I mean, there's two pretty big questions there. Maybe I'll start with the defensive philosophy. I played a really long time, and I was never that good. I was like probably at best like a back of the bench club nationals player. I mean, I've been to club nationals as a mixed player, and that's about where I'm at. And that's cool. Um, but I mean, because of that in college and in club, I was always like thinking about what I needed to do to like make sure I was performing as close to my maximum capabilities as I could, whatever that might mean. Um, so I played on a team in '06 or '07 called Sack Lunch. This was like the second in line to Bravo team in Denver back then, with a lot of amazing people, a lot of folks who went on to play Bravo or played in a lot of different cool places. And on that team, there were some really brilliant players, and they also kind of had that really, I don't know if pragmatic is the right way to put it, but just like understanding of where they're at as players relative to like elite um, teams and players. Like, what do we need to do to compete with the best of the best, knowing that we might not all of us have the ability to like literally do that, like just go out on the field and run. So they had a defense back then called Ragweed, which came out of, I believe, Wash U in St. Louis. Um, good gravy. I can't even remember his first name because my brain's slipping. But one of the guys on the team, I think, was kind of the person who brought it from Wash U. His name was Bombs. I've seen him at a couple of Summit games. Sorry, Bombs. I probably stole some of your jerseys. But I mean, it wasn't exactly what we're playing now, but it was basically like a switch heavy, like poach heavy in the backfield D. And it was just like, hey, we can't. And this wasn't true for all the players on the team. Like 6 or 7 of those guys went on to play Bravo, at some point in their careers. But just like we cannot match up with like Sockeye or whomever, and so we need alternatives to like mitigate some of our athletic disadvantages. And so it was really interesting for me to learn about that because I kind of fit into that group really well in that like I was a solid player and a pretty good thrower and I worked really hard on the field, but I was short. I wasn't super fast, so that's really where I was like first was thinking really critically about like what you can do defensively, and that's nothing new. Everybody thinks in that way, I think. But I wrote, I don't even remember when it was. I've got a blog that I've updated off and on for 12 or 13 years. But I wrote an entry like 10 years ago called "Why Bother with a Force," and it was like a 2 or 3 parter, and it outlined some of the core principles. I've since unpublished it actually, but
I was about to say we'll link it.
But it was basically some of the framework for kind of what we run now. In that, like at that point, even just coaching like mid-tier college and mid-tier club, it seemed like there's opportunity to do more with a mark than just go flicker backhand or like a little bit beyond like start flat and then ease into and around, and I mean we've run on teams that I've been a part of at every level from high school to college to mixed club to bad men's club to Bravo. We've run some form of this style of D where we move the mark around a lot. It looks a lot like a force middle. In some years, it very much was just a force middle. When CSU first made nationals in 2017, it was exclusively a force middle. But I mean, I think broadly the idea is to think critically about how you can create angular pressure on the field, how you can utilize the mark to be more disruptive to throwers consistently, and then how you can build pieces around that off ball, like off disc, whether that's in the backfield, whether that's in the downfield, to like play good D. And there's been a lot of twists and turns and a lot of changes and updates. I mean, y'all have been working with me for a few years now, so you've seen some of the different pieces. But I mean, I think broadly, I just think there's more to playing D than flick and backhand, and I don't think that's overly innovative. I think it's just how we've manifested it as like a really dedicated defense. That's all.
Can you talk a little bit about taking CSU to their first nationals ever, and just like what that season was like and what the progression was like? Because I think that's really interesting as well.
So when I was playing, that was like 03 to 08. So that 5-year stretch in there. We were like an upper tier college, upper mid tier college team. So like game to go type team.
Yeah.
Could never beat Bird. I've got a couple of blog entries I've written about that. Like could never like touch Bird. We took half on him once my third year at regionals and got destroyed in the second half. And like we were talking about that one half for so long. But the goal is always like we want to make nationals. I mean it was always like our goal is to be a team that consistently makes nationals. We never did it when I was playing. The first year I coached, which was the year after I graduated, we had a really talented team, but we're pretty top heavy. And then all those guys graduated, and the team was like battling just to make regionals for several years. The year before Spicer and Jack and Jake and that big like talented class of folks came in, we had a pretty good team, but we did not make regionals. We just had a really bad sectionals. We lost to CU's B team. We lost to UNC, like Northern Colorado. And it was a pretty big like inflection moment for CSU as a program. Like there were a lot of people that loved the team and were really dedicated to the team. But it wasn't like Frisbee was probably the second or third priority on what made like that social circle awesome. And so as we moved into that 2014-15 season, because that would have been spring 2014, we didn't go. One of the things that I said for me as a coach is that if I'm going to keep coaching, the first and foremost priority has to be what we're doing on the field. And It's not like that I was like above that before that. I mean, I had graduated, and y'all know, like when you graduate your team, you're still super connected as a player. But it was basically like, we're going to really dedicate to most, like we're still going to be friends and have it be our community and be a social circle. So that coupled with like that we had a really talented group of people coming in. The 2-3 years after that, we built up scheme, we built up personnel. We had some really great vets that came in and played like 1 or 2 years. I'm losing people's names, but a couple of guys that just kind of like were bulwarks to help young guys learn. And in 2017, we had 3 bids to go to nationals. And it seemed likely that 3 of those, like that the 4 teams in contention were us, y'all it's on CU. I don't remember. Kins, you started the next year, or is that your first year? You're the next year.
2018 was my
Quinn, was
first
that your
year.
first or second year?
I think you're talking about 2016.
I mean, it was like the series was in 2017.
Okay, yeah, the 16-17 season. Yeah, it was my first year. We had 3 bids. The teams were us 2, and then Texas and Texas A&M.
Texas A&M, yeah. And so we squeaked in, earning that 3rd bid and like consolation play at Huck Finn. And then we won the region. It was pretty fun. Like we beat A&M in the first game to go, like 15-7 or 15-8, and then played y'all in the finals. And it was a pretty good game, but it was Texas and 100 degrees and turf, and people's feet were falling off. And so that was super cool. Went to nationals. We didn't win a game. That was okay. I mean, our goals were reasonable at that time. I mean, we wanted to make sure that everybody played. We wanted to make sure everybody got the experience. We didn't have like the infrastructure in place for like school is out and now like be there and practice for that. I'm not making excuses for why we didn't win a game, but it's like we had a bunch of guys that couldn't practice that month because they didn't have plans to be in Colorado.
Yeah. That's actually a pretty interesting perspective. It's like CU has like traditions around the month of May now.
Right. So the next year, anyway, I mean, it was really awesome experience. Didn't win a game, but everybody was having a great time. We basically brought the whole team back next year and just did not have a spectacular season. I mean, y'all know it was a 1 bid year. We were the only team in the top 20. Y'all beat us in quarters at regionals after we got upset by Kansas in pool play, and then Texas took that last bid. That was my last year coaching CSU, but it's still pretty amazing. I wish we hadn't kind of gone out in that 2018 season that way, but
it was a tough year for all of us.
Yeah.
in my mind, and I know you're pretty humble about this, but in my mind, what you do defensively is unique. It's to me revolutionary for ultimate. Being able to experiment at different levels, was that helpful? And then you and I have talked a lot over the years that like how the buy-in is so important. When did you finally feel like you did have enough buy-in, at least with like the Bravo Summit crew, to run what you wanted to run?
It's tough. That's a really good question. I think we've talked about before, Mike. I don't know if I've talked with you, Kins or Quinn. Like, there's a Thinking Basketball podcast. I think it is about innovation in basketball, and how like the schematic advances that have happened recently. A lot of that comes out from outside of the NBA,
Mm-hmm.
because like when you don't have otherworldly talent, like you have to, just like my example of talking about sack lunch in 06, 07, like you got to think about creative ways to do it. And it doesn't mean that having like, you can't have very talented players and coaches also innovate, but it kind of forces it out of necessity. So I mean, kind of what I interpreted the first part of your question of like some of where it came from was just like needing to figure out alternatives when we could not literally run with other teams.
Right.
And then the buy-in piece is the absolute critical linchpin, and that's for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for any team's success. That first year on Bravo, when we had a season 2021, was really tough because it was a really intimidating context for me, and it wasn't anything other than my own making. Like, folks were super welcoming and open. And I shared pretty candidly, like coming in was challenging because it had felt really exclusive in the past. But even with like good energy from the team, like it was hard to like
Yeah.
really,
I think you and I relate this way as well.
yeah, like really be like, here's what I want to do and why I want to do it, or here's what I want to try, because I didn't have like the backing of like a lot of high end success, as Kins would point out with people like TK, right? Like, but literally, I've been to college nationals once. I played in club nationals as a mixed player 15 years beforehand. So it's like, Quinn, please try to do this thing because it worked for Choice City Hops in the game for select flight at regionals is challenging, even if Quinn is open to it. And Quinn's always been super open to it. I just say it because I'm looking at him. But like that, getting over that energy was challenging. And there are some folks who had some pushback,
Of course. Yeah.
and even like this year, like I mean, it's always there for me because I struggle with confidence pieces, but like being able to like I feel really grateful that we have a team that is so bought into like our team in Bravo, and I don't mean that just on the defensive side. I just mean on like us as a group, that we can do a lot of these things, and there's a lot of patience and like curiosity surrounding like different methods and whatnot. But even within that context, it's still challenging. Like, oh, I really want to try this, but Kins is going to make a face at me, and I'm just saying that because I'm looking at you. But
I have the same feelings though.
yeah, but that buy-in piece, I mean, that is the core of I think what makes a really good team. It doesn't matter what you're doing. I mean, it does, but like get buy-in to whatever y'all are doing, whether it's cultural pieces, whether it's O pieces, whether it's D pieces, and having people genuinely like want to be a part of that and want to help that grow, and you're going to find success. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to win nationals, but it means you're going to like have a team that supports each other, trusts each other, like can operate as a unit, can get through the challenging times. I think that's the biggest, that's the biggest indicator for me what a quality team is how do you respond to, when stuff's not going well. And it's a testament to what an amazing group we have together here. It's a testament to, like the support we get. Like I get tons of support from you and Joe as the other coaches, and y'all know I get stressed and frustrated and grumpy and swirl the sink on all kinds of stuff all the time. But we come out the other end with a pretty good product, so I appreciate that.
I have like a funny story about kind of similar about this. So like just to start, I always had, probably leading up to like 2020 or 2021, I always had like a personal stink towards Spicer and TK, just just because like I grew up in Fort Collins with them. I didn't go to CSU. I went to CU, and I just was like, I was a young person, and I just like had like almost like a vendetta. I was like, oh no, Spicer's not even good, and like TK doesn't know how to coach, all this like bullshit, right? And it wasn't until I was actually coached by TK and I actually played with Spicer that I realized like these two are obviously very incredible at what they do.
Legit.
Yeah. But it was funny. I think it was the beginning of the 2021 season. And at this point, me and TK had gotten closer. Like we'd become friends, or it might even be 2022. I can't remember. TK, you might remember. TK writes this email to me out of the blue. And it's a long fucking email. This thing is big. And I tell this story to players every once in a while.
TK's detail-oriented, man.
Dude, this email is gigantic. And I get it. I'm like, what the hell is this? And he basically just rips me to shreds for like not actually, but kind of for like 1,000 words. And it was basically just telling me that I wasn't playing the defense how I was supposed to be, and like I had like a lot of like I was an upper player on the team, and he wanted me to buy into this system. And whether I was buying, I definitely wasn't buying in, but whether I wasn't buying in because I just didn't realize it or whatever reason, but he writes me this huge email about how I'm not running the defense correctly. And TK, I don't even know if we ever talked about it. And then from that point on, it was just like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And I just have bought into the defense, and it's completely changed how I've played defense, because before I was like a good defender, but I would get blocks sometimes, and I would get beat more because I was just like trying to get blocks. And now I'm a way better defender for it. And it was such a funny thing to look back on. And I remember it very fondly at this point. It's a pretty hilarious story to think about and to tell people, just because I think it was 2021 TK. I'm pretty sure.
How many GIFs were embedded in the email?
There was no GIFs because there was no GIFs because my response to the email was, can I see? I need you to send me stuff.
That's actually so interesting. Wait, would that have been after the 2021? Like, was that fall nationals? Would that have been after that for college?
Oh,
I think so.
Just because I remember a game, one of our Cal Poly games, Quinn, and you got
I got beat deep like 6 or 7 times in that game.
Yeah. And I just, by now not knowing this is actually so interesting, because I feel like after that there had definitely been a change in like, because I feel like that it's like you said, it was all like mindset, you know, like there was no, it was just kind of like, I'm gonna make an excuse for that performance at nationals. I had mono during that tournament, right. But yes, I played like absolute dog shit. Well, it was more defensive minded, yeah. Especially that I was, because it was more of like a, so that's just, I find that very interesting that maybe coupled with this email, things have, because, you know, now no one would think of you in that light. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking of it pretty strongly, like at the time, and have not like even like that, like kind of like questioning Quinn on defense hasn't even like crossed my mind since then. So thank you, TK. The one thing I was going to say in regards to the buy-in is, you said like, you know, create buy-in, it's so important, and obviously everyone would agree. So then there's also the question of like how you create buy-in. And for me, what always made it super easy, and why like I don't even think I ever really questioned buying in or not, is because like when it's apparent to me that someone has put in lots of time and effort thinking about something and like put in a ton of work, and then, you know, presents that to you, like for me it's like you might as well at least give it a shot, you know, like if it seems like this is just a spur of the moment, someone's trying something new, you know, it's a little more difficult to maybe just buy in to whatever is going on. Whereas like when you receive a PowerPoint and there are well put together speeches being conducted at practice, it's like a no fucking brainer for me to be like, all right, we're just fucking doing it. Like, and so I think that's credit to TK. And then advice for a lot of other people is like, if you want to do something and you want to like put yourself out there and try something new, which you absolutely should, but make sure you put in the time and effort to like come off as like a credible source and someone who's put a lot of thought behind this product that you're now going to be endorsing. Cause I just think that is like so crucial. And a lot of people like have a good idea and want other people to try it and come along with them. But it's like, are you going to be able to take the time to think about it, put stuff down on paper and do that kind of stuff? And I think that's one way that you can create a whole bunch of buy-in.
Yeah, I feel like what you just described, the latter half there, has been me for the last year and a half. I have some good ideas, but I have no time to figure out how to communicate any of them to you guys. That's why I'm so thankful that we have TK and Joe.
It's a coaching group. It's a group effort. It's a group project.
It certainly is.
So like to weave a lot of this together, Mike, and to go back to your question about my coaching philosophy, I mean, Ken's kind of touched on it, right? Like, here's what I realized. So I used to, I still sometimes do it, as y'all know, but like capacity wise, I can't. I used to like give feedback emails, or at least like if anybody wants a feedback email after a tournament, let me do it for you. And so I don't remember when it was, but I remember like giving somebody a feedback email, and then like 2 weeks later I reread it after I had sent it, and I had watched the game that like most of that feedback had come from in my mind, and I realized that feedback was terrible, like because it was based off of one or two like major stick in your mind moments.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't how that person had really played that whole game. And that is my coaching philosophy. And y'all know this from having worked with me, is like, we play a sport where there are awesome highlights, and the ability to have an awesome highlight. And I'm sitting with two dudes that have an unbelievable, well, three, Mike, I'll throw you in there. I haven't seen you play great grandmasters or whatever it is, but like
there were some sick fucking highlights.
But like that's what's celebrated, like the big huck, the big sky, the huge layout block, and those things are amazing. I'm not trying to take away from the ability to do those things, but like as I watch more and more film and like get down to the nitty gritty, like Quinn could have three amazing sky catches and have played a terrible game. It didn't mean he did or didn't, but most of the feedback Quinn's going to get, and like in the prop circle, it's going to be like, Quinn, you crushed that game. But like I spend so much of my time looking between the lines, right? And again, it doesn't mean highlights are bad or that Quinn skying people isn't cool, but like most of what's really important happens in those small moments. So defensively, like really putting most of the time and effort into making those small moments as successful as possible and letting the big moments just come. Is a big part of what my focus is on, and part of like the philosophy of how I tried to reinforce that with the teams I've been a part of is like celebrating those little moments, right? Like I get super pumped up for weird stuff. Like I either get crazy pumped up when somebody who like generally doesn't make big plays does, like somebody who almost never gets a huge layout block, I'll go bonkers for it. Or like freaking some people who have a really hard time executing the backfield roll at the right time, like them doing it correctly like 3 times in a row on a point, and I'm going to go nuts. But like it's those like little moments that I think are worth celebrating. And like conversely, I think it's really important that like the big moments that don't go your way. So Quinn just got beat deep 3 times in a point. That's not just on Quinn, but it's really easy to talk about Quinn getting beat deep 3 times in the point because that's the outcome. But being able to like critically distill down like what has happened there. Maybe it was Quinn playing bad D, but maybe we forced the wrong way. Maybe they got a power position look he's not expecting. Maybe he's prioritizing another section of the field and he's doing that intentionally, right? Like thinking about like all those little moments with how to both reinforce like good and bad when the outcome isn't always what we want. And that idea, I wrote about it a little bit in my post this Nationals blog, is I think what, helps our defense to be consistently good is that we generally, and I fall victim to it at times of it eroding, but like we generally trust that if we continue to work towards executing the things we know are effective, like we're going to get there. And we've got 3 years worth of data that would tell us that we will get significant breaks in almost every game we play if we're able to execute X, Y, Z, work hard in these spaces and whatnot. And it's not because I don't want to celebrate like the people who get the outcome, the people who get the block or whatever. Like I'll celebrate every one of Jarb's blocks until the end of time because he's amazing.
Yeah.
But like highlighting all of the pieces that contributed to that, and then also sharing the burden of all of the pieces that might lead somebody to feeling like they're not playing well. Like that is my coaching philosophy. Like, and I think when you have the buy-in and the support and like the emotional connection that really strong teams have, like it makes it that much easier because you can't do it unless folks genuinely care for each other and genuinely are invested in each other's success. And I mean, that's really it.
That was some real gold there, TK. I honestly, for the listeners, I feel like go rewind the last 2 minutes and re-listen to that. Like I think we talk about showing what success looks like and freedom to fail. That's like those are the buzzwords, but what TK just described is what it actually means. And man, if you, we will never show our film room channels, but it is true. Like TK really does highlight all those little things that make the difference and make a point successful or possession successful, a defensive possession successful. Sometimes offense, but mostly the defensive side. And I think that's another great way to establish buy-in. At least it has been like for over time. Like you can see those little moments are what's causing over time really positive outcomes for us.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because I feel like I always realize this at nationals, but it's way less about who's making the big plays, and it's way more about like doing the little things that TK was touching on, and like those are what makes the good teams and the good players. But it's so hard; it can be difficult to identify that. And I've even like having now spent more time with TK, like when I watch film, can focus a lot more on some of those little things, and even felt like watching some of the even some of like the semifinal from this year, I felt like I noticed even a couple things, mostly defensively, where I just felt like they were super tiny and more just kind of just us feeling more like we had to make a play and less doing the little things that we're typically better at doing. And I find it really interesting, and I think it's for younger players who typically grow up and want to make when I was becoming a better player, want to sky people and you want to get layout blocks and do all of those things, and those are awesome. But when you really like want to help your team win, you start focusing way more on like containing an around or just repositioning at a different time, and that's a important shift in mindset to becoming like a good player, like a playmaker, to becoming like a really great player that helps your team win.
We need to send this to James Harden.
Dude, we did no, because James Harden is the system.
Yeah, that's
you know what I mean? Like, God,
we were talking about James Harden pre-pod, so that's just like it's all I can think about while we're talking about this is James Harden talking about.
He's the prime example of just not doing that right now, and the Sixers are a prime example of what TK wants.
TK is a Sixers fan.
The Nuggets.
TK is a Sixers fan. You heard it here first, everyone. Just in case you didn't know, TK is a huge Philadelphia 76ers fan. He talks about it all the time. And we're fighting. We're fighting in Philly for TK. So we do it for you, TK.
Well, we know TK loves the Nuggies. But actually, you did send a nice little blurb about the Pacers to us earlier today. I actually feel like it's worth mentioning because it is very much about buying. Should I read it? What do we think here, guys?
Yeah, let's
now
do
you
it.
just now you have to, like, you've already.
I was
introduced it. Like,
I was also at a.
It'd be weird.
I was at a wedding this weekend with a bunch of Pacers fans. They were all from Indiana, and it was the dad was like during like everybody was getting ready for the wedding and the Pacers game started, and he took out his phone and sat at the counter and started watching the Pacers on his phone at like full volume, and everybody else was like running around doing wedding stuff, and he's just watching the Pacers. And I sat down with him, and we just watched. I was like, this is sick.
Classic dad.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the quote that TK sent us from TJ McConnell. It feels like they need. Okay, I need to actually figure out how to read. It feels like they need you out there offensively and defensively. You're not just sitting in the corner waiting for a shot. And your commentary on this is that it this sort of basketball, even more than regimented systems, relies on trust. When you don't have a script for how a possession is supposed to develop, you have to believe that every teammate who touches the ball has the best of intentions. And I think that's a pretty good encapsulation of what we, strive for as a team. And how I think a way you can develop more buy-in as a group too. You have to be able to trust your players to be able to make plays, and a word that we've been using a lot is problem solve in the moment. And
That's like 3 or so words. Just
Okay.
one problem solve in the. Sorry.
it's a lot of
Yeah,
words.
Anyway,
Anyway, TJ McConnell, former Philadelphia 76er, great. So no surprise
yeah.
that TK is quoting him in our Slack. Just oh no,
For anybody who's curious, that's an article about Tyrese Halliburton on the ringer.com. TJ McConnell's their backup point guard, and they just talk about like their offense. They're currently the best offense in the NBA, and like how Halliburton's like unselfish and like push the pace attitude like trickles into the
Go
entire
Cyclones,
offense.
by the way.
I'm a huge NBA fan, so you'll get snippets of that from me all the time. But I think one thing that's really interesting and like gratifying, like for those of y'all that have followed Bravo, I guess I'm talking to people that aren't in this group before because I know you'll have followed Bravo. But like our buzzwords are like core words are trust and love, and like I read more and more in like professional American sports about how like some of that energy is encapsulated. I remember reading like an Andy Reid quote about Patrick Mahomes, and I, as somebody from Colorado, I'm not a Chiefs fan, but like how important it is for Mahomes to play with a lot of joy, which is a core tenet, of like, maybe not in word for Bravo, but I mean, it's something we talk a lot about on Summit, and, like playing with that joy, the trust piece coming here from the Pacers and TJ McConnell, but like it's real because I'm sure we've all been on those teams and probably have been those people. I know I have. Like where Kins throws it into the ground and I scream at him about what are you doing, Kins? Why would you do that? But like, do I trust that Kins did not want to throw it in? I mean, it seems silly to say it, but like, how do you detach from that like negative reaction to something going wrong? Like, of course he wouldn't want to throw it into the ground, but how do I like process that real time? How do I have that trust and know that it's going to be okay, right? Like that we're human, and no matter, and all we can do is aspire to like do the best that we can and trust that the work we're putting in is like going to maximize those outcomes. And if Kins throws it into the ground on one possession, I have to trust that he's going to drop a bomb backhand on the next possession because A, I know that he's going to do it. I have that trust, but B, like, that's the crux of what I'm talking about here, right? Those teams that, again, because I've been on them and I've been a part of like that negative energy that just like one thing goes wrong or like you're struggling or whatever, and you start turning on each other and blaming and like tearing it all up in that moment because your adrenaline's going and your heart's pumping. You're like, this is wrong. Those are the teams that should really think critically about like how they evaluate, their core values and what they're doing. Because having been on those teams, having been a part of those pieces, it's not fun, and you're not going to do very well, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Like,
why would you want to spend so much time? You're spending so much time and effort into this. Why would you want it to be so painful and stressful? And this actually reminds me of another pod that I want to plug. There's a series actually that TK you might be interested in listening to on the Freakonomics Radio pod. The series is called How to Succeed at Failing. I haven't gotten through the whole thing, but there's 4 parts, and it talks about, I think, in great detail, a lot of what we try to pursue, and that is learning from mistakes and also realizing that they're unavoidable. So you might as well make them useful and learn something from them. It's it's an old adage, but all the fucking cliches are cliches for a reason.
Yeah. And TK, interesting that you bring up Andy Reid just because he also was a great coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. So maybe, I don't know, there's just a little more Philly in you than you'd like to admit, or at least you resonate clearly with tons of people from Philadelphia. While you think about that, and then maybe why you're also like so drawn to me, because clearly, like, from Philadelphia, you just have like a real affinity to these types of people. My question would be then how to, because you're right with, you don't want to like have all that negative energy and like distrust feed in, but then how do you deal with like the desire to get better, knowing that you have to address things, like not mistakes, like obviously like throwaways and executions, but like, for example, your email to Quinn, like you felt like he was doing something, like how you address those type of, I guess, emotions,
like
and
when to be hard
types
on
of things.
people.
Because,
Is that
or just like, because, it sounds so easy to just like be supportive and like positive, yet like there's definitely a balance of like getting better, and not negativity, I suppose, but a little more, I'm not sure the exact word I'm looking for, but I just wonder then like where that balance comes in, because you're definitely pushing people to get better, and therefore like maybe that just is like you getting better. I wonder about that balance, I suppose.
I mean, I want to clarify at least one piece. I don't think it's about always being positive, because if I were to sit here and tell any of y'all, and you know this firsthand, like from interacting with me, that when Kins throws it into the ground, that I'm like, oh, cool, I'm so excited that happened. We got a learning moment. Like, that's not what I'm doing, right? And I will never say what Mike just said, and I'll probably shove Felix for saying
decision.
it. But like it's not about just like that, like toxic positivity, just the like everything's okay, everything's fine. There's a layer of like, it goes back, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it goes back to that trust piece, and it goes back to that establishment of like really strong relational pieces. Like, if I send that email to Quinn, like before him and I have built up some level of trust, then that probably has the opposite effect, right?
So I remember, I looked for the email, by the way, I couldn't find it, but the email started with, "I think I know you well enough now to say this to you," and then it was just 1,000 words of shredding me. But okay, go ahead, continue.
You suck.
So
I think I know you well enough to rip you apart.
But I mean that, jokingly and not jokingly, like the ability to build and maintain those relationships, and for me to have the trust that I can provide critical feedback to any of y'all, and similarly the other direction, like, and it's going to, like, not just saying that it's coming from a place of love and a place of like wanting to get better, but knowing that that's real, like that's when you've got like a healthy situation. So there's a couple of different pieces to that, right? There's just the literal, like, how do you provide critical feedback about negative situations? So there's one piece, which for me is just like working really hard to have the social capital and trust with those that you're interacting with so that you can have that interaction. The second one is like being able to really contextualize critically. Kins, you and I talked about this, right? I'm really stressed all season, and at nationals, I'm a lot less stressed because I know we're about where we're at. Like, and I'm okay with that, whether or not it's where I want us to be. Like, I know we're there, and that in this moment, we're not going to get that much better, right? We may execute a little better. We may have like an up and down game, but like we're not gonna change rock history like at nationals in the middle of everything, right? Like we got to trust that like all the work we put in up to that point is going to get us as close as we need to be. So like when you turf it at nationals, should the impact feel greater on me? And it's funny because I don't think you had any turfs. So I just keep saying that. But like should the impact be worse? We're on the big stage. This is when it matters most. But no, I don't care because I know that like you are in the right, like you are, I trust that you're in a space where you're good to go at that point. I'm more pissed at like solstice in June when I'm like, you should be better than that, Kins. And this is what you need to focus on all season. But at nationals,
Yeah.
it's like turf it, whatever. And then the last piece,
Yeah.
that kind of answers that question. And again, this is a conversation that we've all had, is there has to be a setting in which people can authentically react in ways that help them process. So that's going to be different for everybody. When we were getting crapped on by Rhino at Pro Champs in the first half, I was so angry. But is it good for me to come into the huddle and be angry? No, I went over and I shoved a bench over for some reason, like away from the team.
I love that. Let's go.
And I told Joe, like, you call the next couple of Ds because, like, I just, like, I need to process in a way that's healthy for me. But for me, where my growth has been an acknowledgement of, like, my demeanor, words, and reaction do have an effect on other people. So I want to effectively process in ways that are going to help me through it, but also an acknowledgement if what I need to do is scream at Kins to process, okay, maybe that is real, but like, what is also the effect that has on Kins, right? So being able to balance out like what I need to do as an individual with also like knowing that in a position of power and a position of trust and in a place that, I've worked hard to earn that trust, like if I come and scream at you in the face because that's how I need to process, like that has an effect on you and probably not the effect that I want, unless we have like established this like fire me up TK, get in my face, and I know that's not what you and I do, right? Like, so I mean there's a lot of layers to that, but end all be all, it comes back to
I don't remember the last time.
relationships.
I don't remember the last time we got shit on by Rhino.
The first half of the game, we wrecked them like 15-9, but like we were losing the first half.
You
know what?
It might have been back and forth a little bit. Did we take half though?
Maybe I blacked the first half out then.
Did they take half? They did take.
We broke them like 9 times that game or something. Only won by like 5 or 6. And I like the first half we were just like could not find our feet. That's all.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
that was so windy.
And then the second half we switched to upwind, downwind lines. And
okay, I remember.
Yeah,
we did beat them bad though.
You know what's funny, TK? You saying how you get my face fired me up. That reminds me of a funny moment at Nationals when I threw a bad turn in the machine game
against the zone,
and you came up to me against the zone,
Oh,
and TK came up to me and was like, and TK came up to me. It was a bad decision, and I knew it. And TK came up to me and was like, they're testing you, and they've got some of the rangiest deeps in the game, and all that went through my head was, TK, that was Tim Shock, and he sure as hell is not one of the rangiest fucking deeps in the game. So, like, even though I completely agreed with what you were saying, all that was going through my head was no fucking way TK thinks Tim Shock is one of the rangiest fucking deeps in the game. And if he does, he's a fucking
Let's qualify what I actually said there, though. Because I said they're not testing you physically, they're testing you mentally. And then I did say the rangy deep thing. Which I'm not going to argue with the Tim Shock piece, but like, yeah.
That turnover, I was going to say, well, one, I don't know. I think we were slipping a little bit. The pressure was building, and that was like trying to do a little, like losing a loss of patience, was definitely part of it. And then also part of it was just like me misreading like many things, but also that probably comes from losing patience and trying to do something that's a little too difficult. Like one thing
they
about
tested you at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, they just do the zone. And I think like what's good about a zone is, it's not creating a lot of pressure per se, but like when that like mental state is a little sped up, you almost like feel it even though it's not there. Like when I'm in a different mindset, it's way easier to slowly march your way up through a zone and like be like, I'm just going to take all day and it doesn't matter how long this point takes. Whereas in that one, it was like, well, what happened was Buck was pushing down my near sideline. Quinn was already stretched super deep on the far sideline. So I had their deep split by 2 people. And I figured like Buck was so open, I tried to do like a reverse psychology on Shock where like I'll no look it to Buck. And the plan was to no look a backhand to Buck and throw it cross field to Quinn.
Can we pause for a second here?
Yeah.
Let's really break down what you're saying. You're saying you had a receiver so open that your strategy was to use them as a decoy.
Yep.
To throw to the covered guy.
Exactly, because Quinn wasn't necessarily covered either. Shock was in the middle, but I kind of anticipated when I faked a backhand to Buck that he would bite. But I don't think. I mean, maybe either.
You also threw the disc to the middle.
I threw it to the middle. Well, the other part of what I was going to say is, so there was a crosswind from where the side of the field that you were going on to the side that Buck was going on. So the way I threw the disc with the edge. Like it got pushed down instead
super
of like
down,
sailing farther to your side, which was another like critical. Like if I'm more locked in, because that also would make my throw to Buck so much better because it wouldn't float and it would just like go. And so I really messed up that situation and overestimated Shock as the rangy deep, which I think. Like, really, it was the complete opposite. Maybe if he was a rangy deep, he would have been like, fuck that. I'm going to go D up this throw to Buck, and I would have dimed
He's like,
Quinn.
I have no shot.
Yeah, he's like, I have no shot.
So you're playing 4D chess, and he was playing 5D chess.
Something. He was either 5D or 1D checkers.
But, like to circle it back to what we were actually talking about, like, I don't think it was bad that I said that to you, but I said that out of frustration, like not out of like, I think this is going to get me a positive outcome. It's just like turnovers against the zone, like really bug me for whatever reason, like more so. And like, I also feel the pressure of that moment, even though I don't have to be on the field like y'all are doing. So like, as I think about like that moment, like what am I hoping to get out of this? Theoretically, it's that you don't throw another turnover in the zone. But is me saying that to you really getting you closer to that? I don't think so. I mean, they didn't play another dedicated zone point that game. It doesn't matter. But like, that's what I think back on moments like that as I like think about how to get better at my job as a coach. Right. And like what is most helpful in that moment for Kins? And honestly, like in my experience, it's probably for me to say nothing. Like from me to you with our relationship and all of that, right? Like just, you don't need to hear like from me that was and maybe you disagree, but I don't think you need to hear from me anything on that, right? Like you take shots and you can talk through and justify why you did or didn't do it, and you're not going to hit them all, but you hit them at a good enough rate, like that's what makes you good, and like that's the whole point. And if we try to micro out every single one, like then we just we end up in that like we're
upset at each other. And what's and I think that is just a testament to like how we were feeling in the moment, because I think when we're more comfortable and slowed down, it's way easier to be mindful, and like a thought pops into your head, you want to tell me that, but you like are able to like take a couple deep breaths. You're like, do I really need to say this? Maybe not. And then you don't say it. Whereas like in that moment, when I really realized how ramped up we were was on the 11-11 point that took like 10 minutes or whatever. I was on the sideline for basically the whole point. Like I got subbed in and ended the point, fresh legs, hell yeah. But like I was on that sideline, and at first it was like the first like 3-4 turnovers, I was just like trying my very hardest to remain calm myself because I was so on edge. It was such a big point that we wanted to score. So I was like just trying not to tense up, and I was realizing how tense I was like as the point kept going. Right. And then after like 6-7 turns, I was like, all right, this is dumb. And I realized how like amped up everyone on the field was, and that's like why all these mistakes were happening. And that is what completely flipped my mindset into be like, okay, we need to calm down if possible, or at least I'm now calmed down. I understand that other people aren't calmed down. And I just think that was like a real, and who knows what like causes those things to happen. But I definitely noticed that especially later in that game, just like how high energy and fast paced our minds were moving, because it was difficult for people to go through a progression, to like make a single hard cut, to like play chilly on defense, just because we were so amped up. And so like, like I like to default in those moments. I'll go up and tell people like, hey, just like one move, like don't make more than one cut. Like if you change direction more than, which a lot of times you'll start seeing like the people go back to like dancing, or you're trying to do all these things, and like the more you can just like take some deep breaths and dial back into going, like that's the true challenge in those moments. Like not beating
So,
the other
Kins, do you
team, but
feel
beating
like
yourself.
in that moment, could TK have said something like that would have been useful? Like,
Well,
or
I don't even know. Like, I almost feel like that's one of those moments where potentially you call a
saying that,
timeout, and
right? That's
and
actually so that actually is a question I had for TK as well. Maybe for the whole group is looking back. Not that we should look back with regret, but was there anything that you guys would want us to do differently? Not from an on-field standpoint, but maybe should we have called a timeout?
No.
well, I don't think it's like should we or shouldn't we. I think it's more of like a
For the future,
in the
if we're
future.
yeah.
Yeah. Like
Let-
I think what the potential pro of calling a timeout would be, because for me it was like it took so long to even recognize that I was at that place. Like it took the point
Yeah.
taking so many turnovers for me to actually realize what was going on. Like if that point had maybe been just a couple turnovers, then I don't ever like snap out of it. But to me, I like something happened and I like snapped out of it. Well, I really just realized what was going on. I became aware of like how my own body was reacting, and then I started seeing it in everyone else, and that like actually helped me calm down and like play better. But I think like what the potential pro of like calling a timeout in that situation would be is like, you'd get a classic like Joe brings it in, and you could just get everyone to recognize and to take a moment to like register how they're feeling, because maybe that would help. Like if everyone was able to take a couple deep breaths, understand how they were feeling, and then like sit with that a little bit more and not let it to like continue to build and spiral out of control.
Do you remember how that point ended?
I threw the hammer to Becky.
Yeah, it's just funny talking about like chilling out, and then
Well, he was wide open.
Okay,
He
yeah,
was-
because
he-
I drew two guys to the right side, and then you threw that hammer to the far
Yeah,
side. It double
yeah.
helixed back. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Like it wasn't a great hammer for
It was-
sure, but it was
yeah.
like on the spot that like Becky, who's a strong receiver, can just like go up and get it. Like it was not a well executed throw, but he was so open.
I think if that wasn't completed, I'd have lost my mind.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
I felt I was super open, and you just like pumped the flick and threw the hammer. And if he didn't catch that, my head would have exploded, and
Yeah.
it would have been game over.
Yeah, that was that was an awesome point for sure. But yeah, that's what I think the pro of a timeout potentially. Like you'll
In the
see that in
future.
sports sometimes when things are sliding. A team calls a timeout, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But oftentimes it can work to be like, hey, like we're gonna reset the momentum is clearly on the other team. Take a timeout, take a pause, reset, hopefully try to get it back to like even, and see if we can't like come back with a little newfound energy.
And I mean, and I don't know how much I want to talk about that specific moment because it's probably less interesting because we were the only people there. But like in my mind, so that was an O point, but it was an O point that our D line played, even though like we had like 15 injuries throughout that point.
Yeah.
And we scored it, right? I mean, I know we scored it, but in my mind, like that meant like we had just deflated them like completely. Like we just gritted out this 12-minute point with a bunch of turns and a bunch of injuries, and it was super physical. And we scored it. We got a fresh D line good to go. They had a bunch of their main guys crossed over on that D already. Like in my mind, in that moment, whether or not it was correct in hindsight, in that moment, it's like we have the energy that we want. And it's a testament to Machine, honestly, in that second half that like they did not shrink at all from like moments that I thought could have like crushed them, you know, like losing that point and then just keeping playing, because I thought whoever won that point was going to win the game. Like,
and they scored in like 30 seconds. Like
it was a 2-throw score.
Yeah, it was insane. Like and it was insane. Like they had like a couple points down the stretch where they scored so quickly, and oh god, it's ridiculous. Honestly,
we had that point, and they had a lot of guys crossed over, and they trotted out their O line. They ran Paul Erders down on the rail. They hit him, and he threw a huck to OJ Samar.
Oh, was it OJ that one?
I'm pretty sure. Just like perfect flick huck, wide side, like dime ball. And the point was 2 throws in 10 seconds. And then I walked back out on the field after playing a 10-minute point, ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Arter's doing like the little finger guns afterwards, and
Yep.
I was just so annoyed.
Every time he scored, he would put his arms out like the "Are you not entertained" thing. I wanted to punch him.
And it was interesting because like TK was saying, like we were in control of the game still, but it didn't feel like it. Like mentally, I don't felt like we thought we were in control because it was 13-13. We were receiving it. And I'm like, this game is, we still have to fuck up for them to win. And
Then we fucked up.
we
Lo and
fucked up.
behold.
But it kind of, but like it's almost like one of those moments where whether you're manifesting and projecting it or not, like it felt like something was gonna happen. Like
Right.
I remember on the line, like almost telling myself, like, guys, like we're still in control of this game. Like
I think Kuhlman actually said.
No, Kin said it.
Well, it said that you said.
Yeah, Kin said it. Yeah, he said, we're still in control of this game. You said it on the line. And then
Yeah.
scored on us, but whatever.
And I mean,
and then
it's
we
like-
weren't.
But I'm pretty comfortable saying there are fewer people on the team I'm more confident with the disc in their hands than Buck, and he had that turnover and that sucks. And I feel bad for him. But like, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about with outcome. Like
Right.
Buck's going to complete 99 of 100 of 100 of his throws. Like that is all I've ever seen of Buck, that he's a very
Mhm.
consistent thrower. So like,
Right.
Yeah.
it sucks that it happened at that moment. And like, it's not that I don't care. It's not that I didn't want to go to the finals. It's not that I'm just happy to be there because I'm just some chumpy guy, Kins. But like, it genuinely is like, I can't dwell on that individual moment any more than any of the other, things
Yeah.
that went
Right.
right or wrong, just because of the context of when it happened. But
Totally.
it doesn't mean it's not a bummer or anything, or that I wasn't.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mostly just felt bad for Buck because he
Yeah.
freaking played amazing all tournament. And
And I think some of that too is just trusting like the process and the flow of the team. Like, like for someone like Buck, who we all know is a great player, but like, that is a big moment and he has a big role on that team. And we know he can execute because he had been doing all tournament. But like now he's just going to be better equipped because like we trust Buck to get better, as he progresses through his career. Like I have no doubt, like, once we are in that situation again, that like, because I'm confident that we'll be in that situation again.
Yeah,
someone like
the
me.
experience. The
Yeah.
experience.
But like, yeah,
matters.
the experience with like Buck and Coolman, like that kind of thing. Like, and I think that's just part of the journey. Like, because you can't switch up. You like, those guys, even though they were in new positions in that game, like you would never like be like, oh, that's a reason why we wouldn't like, put them in on this point. And like, if something like that does happen, because it's very common for like that to be a difficult situation in your first time in a big game with like an opposing like fan base out there, like that's really hard. But like that, I just feel like, knowing Buck, like that's something that like he's gonna most likely get better on for the next time he's in that situation in a big moment. And so, yeah, I think it's like you're not upset. It's kind of just like you get to a point of like accepting it and, trusting that they'll and hoping that, it'll make them better going
Right.
forward.
And I think it will. Sort of in the spirit of one of your defensive philosophies, and that is making the offense choppy. We did talk about this machine game quite a bit, but I do want to kind of circle back to one of like a specific tactic question for you. What formations are what hurts us the most, and what do you find the most challenging to plan for?
It's a good question. What hurts us the most? I mean, I think
The answer is nothing.
no, the answer is definitely not nothing. I mean, realistically, when we struggle defensively, it's usually because we're out of rhythm defensively. Like the D is very much designed, and like the personnel pieces and like what's called on the line is based on like, it's not just based on that individual point, right? It's like kind of a flow. So it's a lot harder when that gets chopped up. In that like we don't have like y'all know we alternate our D lines like every other D point almost 100% of the time, right? Like we play one D line, then we play the other D line, then we play the first D line. It's pretty patterned, but like that is intentionally like part of, because the D lines are able to exert pressure in different ways. So when that pattern gets disrupted, that's a little bit challenging, and that was some of what happened against Machine, and that like I don't think our Gemini, like one of our D lines, I think they played one D point in the second half because we were just having a hard time offensively. So like the disruption of defensive chemistry and rhythm is a real thing. But like where that comes from is what y'all were talking about. It's when they score quickly and early where we can't even like exert a little bit of pressure. And I've had some interesting conversations about this, right? Because, you look back in hindsight and you're like, oh, why don't we have like some help over the top or whatnot? And I mean, it's like, in hindsight, I can't argue against that, but like what really happened is Zeke got beat deep on the second throw off the pole. Zeke is 20 years old and is an amazing defender and hadn't played for 4 points. And are we going to have better outcomes like working really hard with Zeke on using his amazing physical tools and getting better at winning that moment? Or are we going to have better outcomes from consistently helping over the top and like putting that like that little Band-Aid on it?
I think
right.
Not to interrupt, a lot of what you continue to remind us is to not overreact to certain moments. And I think it would be easy to do that in those specific cases. I think there have been some games where we get beats deep or we get beat a certain way repeatedly, but it's not necessarily wouldn't necessarily continue to play out that way. And maybe I won't include this. We'll see what the answer is, but and how much information we give. But have you thought about like the games that we have lost tight? We have gotten beat deep, and do you think that's more of a it's definitely not a system thing. Is it players just making plays? Is it a breakdown defensively? Is it loss of rhythm?
I mean, I think it's the cost of doing business at times. Like, I don't remember I think we broke 5 point something times per game at nationals, and that was with one blowout against Darkstar, inflating that a little bit. So like, we know that we overplay unders a lot, and we trust that what we do near the disc will hopefully help us enough to where, we can contest enough of the deeps that it makes it okay. And sometimes there are runs where we just get freaking cooked, and that's maybe some of the costs of doing business. And I think like the not tension point, but like the crux of this is like do you make macro or micro adjustments, right? I think about that ring game at Pro Champs. Quinn, you weren't playing, right? And Kins, you didn't go to Pro Champs. I can't even remember. There's so many tournaments. Like they beat us off the pole, like every D point in the first half. I'm not joking, like 3 passes. And it's unbelievably frustrating. And, it's like, let's throw zone, let's sag help over the top, let's do this, let's do that. And my reaction, I am just as frustrated as everybody in the moment. Like, I don't want to just keep doing the quote unquote same thing. But the adjustments we made on the second half when we won that game, were micro adjustments, right? We shifted our mark a little further. We changed matchups around. We overplayed this specific space. We knew when their sweeps were coming to the wide backhand side. We disconnected the defense, the downfield from the backfield a little bit, like an extra 2 or 3 yards. And they started missing those shots, or they started floating them. So it's like, it's really easy to say, hey, Machine played that point of zone and they got a turn because Shock is such a rangy deep. What a great strategic call it was. And it was. I'm not trying to diminish that. They played it. They have a really deep bag of scheme, and that's really effective for them. Like, genuine kudos to them. But for like how we structure our team, and like how we like structure who is playing on D, I believe we will generally do better, not with depth of scheme, but with like to be able to make micro rather than macro adjustments usually. That being said, like aspirationally, I want to do more. It's just the reality of how much time we have together, like how much time like folks have consistently playing. Like, we've built a lot over the last 2 or 3 years,
right?
And that consistency allows us or affords us the ability to like be more dynamic. But you all know I tried to start the dairy halfway through the season, which is a totally different downfield set, and we just made a correct, critical decision that our time is better spent elsewhere. So I mean, it's easy to, and I sit with it too. I'm not trying to just naysay, but like they beat us deep on almost every D point in the second half easily, and we weren't able to get defensive pressure. And all those things are true. Like that is
Right.
how the second half of that semifinal played out. But
And
I
we're one
don't
of the
think,
best defensive teams in the country still.
I don't think that we are in that situation in the exact same way as if we've adjusted our energies like to X,
Right.
Y, and Z otherwise. And that doesn't mean I'm right either, right? Like it's just how I think about it.
I know Kins has a question for you, but I kind of want to follow up on the machine D, or the Tim Shack being an incredible one-on-one defender, rangy defender, zone defender, whatever type of defender. He's just great. But machine is also right. They have a different style, and I know that you talked to Walden Nelson a little bit. Can you talk about like which other teams were you most impressed with defensively, if any? And is there anything interesting to share from your conversations with Walden?
Relative to like teams we played at nationals, who is impressive?
Yeah. I would say that's most pertinent. But if there are any teams in general that you look at defensively and like that stuff is really good, and maybe would I be curious, like if it's a lot different than what we do, and you still think it's really impressive.
I mean, I think Machines D is really good. I think Rings D is really good. I think Trucks D is genuinely really good. I mean, I think they broke us 4 or 5 times when we played them in that game. But like, they're good in like a different way than I think Machine and Rings. Every team we played had a pretty good D. Rip Darkstar, sorry, not so much. But like, and it's all for different ways. And it's part of the cool part about this sport is Machine has like a super like they have like 7 different looks they can and do throw, and it means you have to be able to read and react to what's in front of you. Like in the second half, they played a lot of force middle, they played 1 point of zone. Johnny got a lot more leeway to like roam, and obviously it was effective against us. Like Ring, as in that first half of our game against them in pool play, I haven't like really broken down exactly what they were doing. Had we faced them in the finals or something, I would have looked more critically at it. But like I'd imagine Kins and Quinn, y'all felt it. Like in that first half, like the margins for our offense were razor thin. Like we're completing high stall, like tight passes consistently. And then like in the second half, found the rhythm, found our feet, and just absolutely rolled. Truck, like it's not like it. They play really, really good fundamental like vanilla D to me, and I don't mean that as a slight. I mean just like they're really, really good at progressive marks, harder rounds, like backfield positioning, like knowing. I'd assume based on how they play our offenders that they scout specific matchups very intentionally and know how they're going to play individuals really well. So like they do a really great job matching up. I think y'all shouted him out already, but Thomas Edmonds is really good.
Yeah.
And it was a huge addition to their D line because last year their D line didn't do anything to our O. Like, I mean, like,
Yeah.
what did they have? 2 turns against us in 2 games at nationals. So I mean, I'm not answering your question, Mike. I mean,
it's like 5. Yeah. Anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it was 6, but let's exaggerate.
Was it 6?
4 in the game that we lost and
in the
2 in the game
play,
that we won.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think that's what's cool, right? Like that's a slate of the best teams in the country, not including Pony, who I would say probably has the best defense in the country. And we all play it differently, and I think that's awesome. And I think it's cool that teams find success in different ways because it keeps it interesting. And of course, like if people want to sit down with me, I'm going to leverage and like talk about why I think the things that we do are really effective and why it's a good approach. And I'm not going to be the one to say that it's the right way to play D or anything. It's just like I know that we have a lot of success doing it, so I'm like, cool, let's do it.
If you had an infinite amount of time, would you want to steal anything specific from any of the teams that we played, or which team would you most want to steal from and be inspired by.
Machine. Like infinite time to like have that many varied looks, but be able to be able to shuffle between them, but have like a really high level of execution within each scheme. No question. Like Machine
Yeah.
has, in my opinion, like the deepest bag of different
Yeah.
looks, but they're good at all of them, but they're not like unbelievably good at like one or two, right? They're just
Right.
very good at most of them. So if we had infinite time, like being able to have that many varied looks and execute at a very high level, ooh, that'd be spicy
totally.
meatball.
Yeah, and the fact that they are very good at them combined is what makes them an excellent defensive team, probably, right? Because it does just keep you thinking offensively.
Yeah, and I mean the advantage they have is they've got definite looks that are better against teams that want to huck, right? So like it's like if a team is going to huck for better for worse, like, and you've got something that is always good against hucking and like can generate reasonable pressure elsewhere, it's not a bad look.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about that too, though, is like I feel like as someone who plays offense, I rarely think about the different
the defense is doing
schemes that a defense is deploying, and maybe that's something I should think about more. But I also feel like so much of what I'm doing is like thinking about what to do like in the specific moment that it almost doesn't matter what they've been doing, because even if they've been force flick the whole game and all of a sudden now they're forcing in the middle, like during the point I don't think about, oh, now they're forcing middle. I just think about like how to set up now that the mark is this way. You know what I mean? Like I honestly, and maybe there's like more, like maybe there's more like subconscious effects of like this switching of patterns that are more relevant. But I just find it interesting because like I never think of, I rarely even think about like what they're forcing, to be honest. Like I'll think about it post fact, like, oh, I had a wide open backhand or flick or like whatever. But I rarely like in the game am thinking about what they're forcing now or like how people are even like playing me, because it's really just like this is what I see, so this is what I do, and that's kind of the extent of what I'm processing that a defense is doing.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way now that you mention it when I'm playing, which is more and more rare these days. Quinn, I felt like you were nodding in agreement there, like you don't even think about the D.
Yeah, it's just kind of unless it's like an obvious zone, like I'm not really thinking about it. And at this point in my career too, like as far as the force goes, everybody's just flat on me, so it's like, oh, they're gonna be flat. But yeah, unless it's zone, I don't notice it.
And we've got plans for you to attack defenses differently, but we'll save that for another time.
That's so sneaky and like mysterious of you, Mike. Yeah, it's like, we're coming for you, and you don't know what it is, and it's definitely not that like you're gonna like, I don't know. It seems like obvious, I guess, what you would do next.
He's gonna run against faster. A flat mark. He's gonna jump higher and catch better, throw further.
That is such a good adjustment.
That's the Quinn way, you just gotta brute force it.
It's true.
Throw further. There's a finite amount of space available.
But that means you throw it higher, TK. Like, come on. Dude.
Honestly, I would talk about more it on the pod, what we want to do with Quinn. But I want to give you some space, kids, to ask your next question.
Okay, I have a question for you, Tim Kefalas. It's kind of like maybe your early season coaching philosophy. I know from being around you that typically the most stressed you are is during tryouts. I think as of most people, which I always find pretty funny because they seem pretty inconsequential to me. Like towards the end of the year, like who the back, say your roster size is like 26, like who the 25 and 26 spot are like towards nationals is pretty like not on anyone's mind typically. However, like at the beginning of the season, like they're in a birdhouse. I saw once Buck and Saeed almost come to blows over whether or not we should be taking a freshman. Anyway, intense moments. But I know you really strive for incorporating and finding new players. So my 2-part question would be, 1, what are you looking for when you're making a team? What kind of players do you like to bring in? And 2, why do you hate CU players so much?
The first real question there is a good one.
They're both very real.
I think it's a little bit of a catch-22 with what we had talked about earlier, right? In what you had kind of reinforced, Kins, for like to really make your team better at winning. It isn't just about the skies, the hucks, and whatever. But the challenge is at tryouts, you got to stand out, and that standing out usually is those big plays because I'm a very detail-oriented person. I try to pay attention to a lot of little things, and it's really hard to see those little things in the moment in a tryout setting because there's so many people. I don't know who people are. Like I'm like processing, like making sure that is that Kin or Quinn's or whatever like new bird player
TK
everybody's
actually
telling me
has
is
really
really,
bad eyesight.
and I also have bad vision. So like there's like when I'm watching you all play real time and it's a team I know super well and I can literally tell who you are like with how you walk and how you throw, like there aren't more inputs in my brain of like figuring out literally who you are. So it's really hard to pay attention to those little things. So what I am looking for is people that are curious and inquisitive and coachable. I think all of those things are intertwined. Like I know it's not the first time somebody would hear this, but like go up and talk to the coaches, ask questions, ask thoughtful questions, not like why are we doing this questions, but like show me that you are interested in the why behind, because that to me, while I can understand it, is also like a I want you to remember who I am at tryouts. That's valid. It's also like a I'm trying to understand what we're doing because oftentimes we're doing things a little bit differently. Somebody who's got motor, like good motor, I think that is an underrated quality. Like y'all heard me talk about Spicer's motor at the beginning. Like somebody who's gonna go hard all the time or has the ability to go hard all the time, you know, if they have a baseline of skill and athleticism, they can have success on the field. And I'm also looking for folks that like other people enjoy being on the field with. Y'all talk about it a lot on this pod. You know, it's really important to me as like a core value of like we have to be in this for like collaborative reasons and have that mutual understanding. And it doesn't mean we don't have people that are like we have spicy people on the team. You're one of them, Kins. Like, but it like we all genuinely appreciate the time with each other. So if I see somebody who's like getting into it with their teammates at a tryout, who's blaming other people for like going to the wrong space or doing the wrong thing, even if they're right, like it's going to take a whole heck of a lot of skill and big play ability for that to like supersede any of those pieces. What I don't care about, I don't care about big hucks. I don't care about big skies. I like layout blocks depending on the context, right? Like if it's one that you really earned. I love footwork. I love being able to stay sticky. I love when you don't turn your outside hip. I love when like I'm able to contextualize you as a tryout's new ability against somebody's game I know really well. Like if I want to see how good somebody really is, I'm going to ask one of you two to go cover them, or I'm going to ask Spicer to go cover them, and like how they react to that moment is a good thing. If you're at a Bravo or a Summit tryout and you've got one of the best players coming down on you, that probably means you've done something pretty good, right? So I mean, there was a bunch of answers in there, but like, don't be a dick. Like it seems like it should be pretty obvious, but don't be a dick. Like that's like an immediate disqualification.
I wonder if these two will try to push that boundary at tryouts next year.
Just watch.
I'm gonna test you, TK.
I feel like those boundaries are not pushed at tryouts for me. Like I'll definitely push those boundaries in different circumstances, but typically at tryouts, I am not.
You're pretty good
exercising my dick tendencies.
Oh, whoa, okay.
Taking a turn.
Whoa, okay, all right. Should we do
last one? Can I say one last one?
Yeah.
I put a
Is it
ton
about
of
dick tendencies?
No, Kins's derailments will not faze me. I put a ton of stock in folks that are very clearly comfortable with the disc in their hand. hands.
Mhm.
Like y'all know, you've been around the game a long time. You can tell when somebody's
Mhm.
comfortable with the disc in their hands. My best example, Cosmic Tim is whatever he is,
CT.
18, 19 years old. He's a
Tim Elliott.
practice player on Bravo. That kid, he's not a kid, he's a young adult, is so comfortable with the disc in his hands. And there's people that are 29 and have been playing for a long time that still don't just have that like cool, fluid, I'm gonna go,
Poise.
like that is a really, really valuable thing. And I and it's I don't know how it comes to be about, but like you definitely can tell who's like, yep.
Reps.
Like Seth Wells is like the quintessential like, okay, he couldn't care less what's going on around him when the disc is in his hands.
Quinn, I'll hand it over to you in just a second, but I want to add a little color to this too, because TK and I are in these conversations together all the fucking time. I mean, Quinn, you're in a lot of them as well. Kins, you have been with us as well. But one thing that TK does a really good job of, and I think you talked about with your coaching philosophies a lot, and coming to Bravo is always having an eye for people who have earned it. That inclusivity piece. I think right we know that Bravo before was very, 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 very CU dominant. It is still quite CU dominant. But I think breaking down a lot of those barriers are like the credit goes to people like TK who recognize those situations, and thank God, Todd and whoever else was involved did reach out to you, because I know Bob Cryer is a big component of this too, but making a Colorado Ultimate community, and I hopefully, like, if you're listening and not from Colorado, that is a goal of yours for your own community. There are so many good people. There's so many good players from so many different areas, arenas, backgrounds, and they don't always have to be from a dominant. Maybe I shouldn't even call us dominant, but an established college program.
Yeah, and it's
And
not. I don't think it takes anything away from how good bird players are. I know you said that kind of snarkily, Kins, of like why I hate CU players, but I mean, I love young players that are eager to learn and enthusiastic about it, and all of the bird guys I've worked with since coming to Bravo and working with Bird a little bit, in a coaching capacity, have been that way. But my point is what Mike is saying is that you get a certain like assumed X, Y, and Z depending on like your pedigree in some way, shape, or form, right? And just being able to like hold that true, like bird players are really good. Nanda and those young guys that are up and coming are awesome dudes that are on our radar, like no question about it. Shout out Nanda, hey buddy. But it doesn't mean that right there aren't really talented, able folks elsewhere. And like just being able to like make it accessible to folks in that way, because y'all have heard me say it before, like Spicer got cut from Bravo in 2015, which wasn't unfair in that moment, but I don't want to speak for him, but I'm going to tell the story that he's told me, is like his issue with it was he didn't get any feedback of like, here's what you should work on, here's what, like if you want to make this team in the future, whatnot. So he got some like positive reinforcement from things he did at the tryout. He thought he did okay, didn't make it, could accept that, but like got no feedback on the why. Like you're too slow, you're too tall, you're too old, whatever it is. So when you don't get that feedback piece and you're external to what feels really exclusive, you don't.
It's not. It doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth.
Right. And so that's just one example. I mean, he's one of the best players on a championship team just 2-3 years later, right? And not everybody's Spicer, but there are tons of really good players out there at CU and elsewhere. I mean, I think Ty, who, yes, I know Ty went to CU and played on the B team, but like he's an example of kind of an outsider that obviously so much belongs. Ty Wynn plays on Summit, plays on Mile High Trash, who's an unbelievable teammate and player and athlete, but like played the B team in college, and like
right.
Like, what do we assume about somebody who only played B team until they try out at Summit? Like, we automatically assume that whoever made those decisions knows something about them. And I'm like, all I see is a dude who is faster than Quinn, and that is not common, like.
All right, we got a race. I don't know, man.
Quicker,
I don't know.
What?
I don't know, man.
shiftier on defense.
We'll see.
He beat you and Jarv at the tryout. Like,
We needed to
whatever.
we need to have you go head to head.
His time was faster, but those times were.
You don't trust TK's hand?
TK didn't do it.
No,
You
I
did
did.
it.
I
You
did
did
the
it.
final round.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, really?
I have requested. I have requested laser timers for this year's trial.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
Thank
Kins,
God.
call up Lithio. Get him down
Thank
here.
God. My
Sorry,
timers were awful, dude. Their reaction time was terrible.
Saeed 426.
That is
Cal
maybe
ran a
possible.
apparently Cal ran a 4.1.
That seems less.
Hey, he's
likely.
fast, man.
No, neither of those are possible. That would make them faster than every NFL player to ever live.
All right, Quinn, kick us off.
All right.
Or take us home.
Take us home. TK,
Country
I'm sure
road.
you're familiar with the finer things segment as a listener. We didn't prompt you, so hopefully you got one. But we're gonna do our finer things. Do you want me to do the intro, or do you want to?
Do you remember it?
I'll do my best.
Okay, go for it.
Kiko
All right.
socks.
Here we go with our finer things segment. Experience a finer moment with a fresh pair of Kiko socks. I can kick us off. So I was gone this. I was traveling this weekend at a wedding, and I didn't get to sleep in my own bed. I slept on a couch one night. All that. But last night I slept in my own bed, and it's not even about the bed for me. It's about the pillow.
Ooh,
Using
nice
your
pillow?
own pillow after not using your own pillow for a couple of days, a weekend, 4 or 5 days is like it's like nothing else.
That's just so funny because until I moved in with Della, like I had the complete opposite. Like my pillows were so trashy that like coming back to sleeping on my own pillows was like, what
Such
the
a
fuck
bummer.
am I doing with my life? Because my pillows were so bad. But now that I sleep in the same bed with Della, my pillows are like a cloud of wonderful.
Do you have a finer thing?
I
Kins?
do. I realized mine at bird practice the other day. When you're at practice, you're in a colored shirt. Coach, you count off 1 to 2. You go off into your team, and you're already in the color that you have to play. That's a finer thing if I ever seen one or felt one.
I think Quinn's strategy is to always wear white because he just assumes.
Yep.
Yeah, but
offense
it's
is-
like when you do like
Offense versus white.
1-2, like when you're just 1-2ing and you're not even on
Yeah,
offense,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
you just get that 50-50. That's a good feeling.
I got a couple, but TK, do you have anything, or do you need a second?
I don't know what the criteria are, so I'll go with this one. Whether or not it's a finer thing, y'all can let me know.
Okay. I will.
I eat a lot of popcorn. Like I like to watch a movie and like pop some popcorn. Like I've been doing it since I was a kid. You get like a kernel stuck in your teeth, and it's really, really annoying. And when you
God,
finally
that's a
like
good one.
when you
This
work
is-
it out with your tongue and you get it out there and you don't have to wait till you're like flossing at night. Like you just get it out and it's just like that clean, relieved feeling of like wherever it was, it's gone now.
Amazing. TK, that was a great one.
Yeah, that was
good.
perfect.
That was
Finer
perfect.
thing.
That is the
was
definition of a
perfect.
finer thing. I have two that are sort of TK inspired, and maybe mine don't fit the criteria exactly.
Okay.
But
I
the
feel like you
first,
say this every time. Can I
Sorry.
just put that out
Sorry.
there? Okay, cool.
I'm a what do I on an unreleased episode that we will hopefully get released tonight or tomorrow. One thing that I mentioned about Kins is he's always himself, and I meant that as a compliment. And how the rest of us, especially me, often hedge. I often like qualify everything before I say it. I should just say the fucking thing.
You do.
And now
You are the king of that. You're like,
And I've literally just spent 45 seconds explaining why I talk the way I talk. Anyway, the first one, because TK and I relate in a lot of ways. We're similar. We're not exactly the same. We are similar in a lot of ways. And one of them is sort of that imposter syndrome, I think is fair to say. Like it has been a little challenging to start coaching at an elite level, like really high level players, and some of whom are close to our peers even. I'm fortunately now like getting old enough where I feel less and less of that. One of the positives of aging. But it's when like I don't know, it's pretty 50-50. Like I'll feel like we have a really sick practice plan and it may go terribly for whatever reason. And I legit lose sleep over it. I cannot stand that feeling. But when a practice goes well for whatever reason, it doesn't matter if I'm running it or not. That is like one of those senses of joy that is honestly close to on par of winning the national championship for me. Yeah, Quinn is wide-eyed right now. That is how much anxiety I think TK and I hold inside of ourselves. The other one though, this is kind of sort of a sweet moment and maybe more of a parent corner shout out Bill Simmons and his podcast, but it was actually it was Sunday, so flying back to Colorado from San Diego. I was at the airport by myself for a long time, but eventually TK showed up with his family and Spicer's family was there as well. But the really heartwarming moment was Mila asked you to read her a book and you said, "Can you read it to me?" Or like, "How about you read it to me?" And she came and sat on your lap and you guys opened up the book and just kind of shared this father-daughter moment. And I just remember thinking in that moment, like how emotionally exhausted I was and how mentally exhausted I was and how sad I was about losing. And like, here you are just like back to real life, engaging with like the most important part of your life, your daughter. That like, to me, I'm just describing like it was a very heartwarming moment for me and something that's seared into my brain now.
But I guess that was also TK just being super exhausted and being like, "No, what if you read the book
How about
to
you read
me?"
it? I'm too tired.
No, I mean, Mike, but it's spot on. I think one of the like most meaningful moments of winning in 2022 was seeing Quinn and Devin embrace like that. You know, like seeing the like.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Still my background on my phone.
We've got like so many folks that support us in different ways to be able to do the things that we do, like just logistically, emotionally, physically, like whether that's a partner, a kid, or whatever. And like those two worlds being able to overlap. And I've already said, like, it was so meaningful for Shayna, my wife, and Mila to be able to be at nationals, to like see everybody's like community, like that's a real, I mean, it's obvious, it's definitely a finer thing, but I mean, that's really what it is like all about for me, is like those, like that joy, celebration, energy being able to be shared with other realms of my life.
It is really nice when, like, I remember after we lost the Summit game to the Aviators and our season was over and being pretty upset, and like Caleb and Maddie come up and are like, "Throw the disc with me now," and I just like barefoot, pretty exhausted, like toss the disc around with them, and you're like, "Yeah." Like,
Whatever.
you know, and they're so happy. Like, they don't even like, they like know we lost, but they don't really give a fuck. And you're like, yeah, it's not that big a deal, is it?
Yeah. Those are the moments, the finer ones.
Wow. You're
right.
welcome, Kiko. Like,
yeah,
Jesus.
seriously.
Yeah.
I expect my check in the mail.
Hey, they're a sponsor. They're backing us. This whole operation.
I don't feel backed. I don't even have a pair of Kikos.
All right, before we start rambling for another 5 minutes here, TK, thanks so much for coming on. It's definitely long overdue. We hold, I think, a lot of the local interesting people in our back pocket and often take you guys for granted. So thanks for being here, and I'm sure we'll honestly, I'll probably talk to you later tonight.
Yeah, and I wanted to just say, like, TK, I know for people like you might feel like you're not going to come back on this pod, but you are, and you will. And you'll get there, man.
I'll get that confidence up.
Right. I would love that for everyone.
Sweet. Okay. Peace out.
Peace.